probably should start.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, welcome everybody. This is actually the last class of our season at the Oracle Institute. What's your name, sir?
Tom Warner.
Hey, Tom. It's good to meet you. And we have a guest from Charlottesville, so we have some people who are definitely interested in this topic. Your life has been so eclectic. Yeah, we had it on our flyer too. I mean, Kirk has been on a spiritual journey his whole life, and has been walking the walk his whole life. He started out selling Bibles door to door, and he's worked on oil rigs, 18-wheel trucks. He's owned businesses. He's been overseas, and now we know he's bi-coastal from what he just told us. But this presentation today is a culmination, I think, of your life's journey. And we're really pleased to have you here. We really, really are, despite the low attendance. I'm so glad you made the trip. And I'm very excited to hear this presentation. So I'm going to turn it over.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It really is a joy to be here. I was trying to remember when I first contacted Mimi. I can't remember exactly when it was, but I do remember my hair was jet black and I didn't have a beard. No, it's been a while, but I have been so much looking forward to this. And now that it's finally here, it's just a real privilege. I can say when I found out I was going to get to speak to the Oracle Institute, I suppose I did what any technically savvy public speaker of the 21st century would do. I sat down at my desk and pulled out a piece of paper and a pencil. And I started scribbling. I thought, now what would these fine folks like to hear? So I started taking a few notes. But more importantly, I got to thinking, now how long does my speech need to be? Because I certainly didn't want it to be too short. But I got to thinking, they probably don't want it to be too long either. I was reminded of this, there was an evangelist that used to travel all over the state of Texas giving revivals. And everywhere he went, he always had a huge crowd show up for his revival. Except he went to this one church one time out in West Texas, and just one old man showed up. So the evangelist asked the preacher, he said, "You think I need to give my sermon?" Just one man showed up. The preacher said, "Well, sure." He said, "If I took a load of hay out to the field and one cow came up, I'd feed that cow." The evangelist said, "Okay, I got it. So he got up and started preaching. And he preached. He went on for 3 hours talking to one man. And he finally got through and he went down and asked the old guy, I said, "Well, how did you like my sermon?" The old man said, "Well, I liked it fine," but said, "If I took a load of hay out to the field and one cow came up, I wouldn't give it the whole load." So anyway, with that, I'll try to find that proverbial sweet spot. But yeah, it really is a privilege for me to be here. Y'all do great work, and it's an honor to be a part of this. But one thing I have been working on for the last couple of years is this effort called the Awareness Series, which to date is comprised of a couple of children's books and this 60-minute presentation that I do titled The Last Sermon. Now, I have to tell you, the presentation comes with a warning label, and not because there's any violence or nudity or adult content, but rather you're liable to hear some ideas this morning that you have never ever heard before. So I want to invite you just to sit back and relax and open up your ears and your hearts and your mind. Who knows, maybe your life will change. I know mine sure did a long time ago. But without further ado, here's the last sermon. Let's just go. Now the biggest problem in the human condition is the collective failure to see ourselves as the human beings we truly are. Let me give you an example. There was a 90-year-old man on his deathbed. His wife of 70 years was sitting by his side. He gazed up into her eyes and said, "Honey, when I was 20 years old, I got kicked out of college for bad behavior, but you stuck with me. When I was 30 years old, I got kicked out of the company for bad behavior, but you stuck with me. And when I was 40 years old, I got kicked out of the country club for bad behavior, but you stuck with me. And now here I am, 90 years old and on my deathbed, and you're still with me." He says, "You know, I'm beginning to think you're bad luck." But seriously, the biggest problem in the human condition is the collective failure to see ourselves as the human beings we truly are. You know, it's been 2,000 years since Jesus was crucified, but people really haven't changed much at all. When I survey the social and political and religious landscapes in this country and abroad, in the dialogue that exists, I see and hear a lot of noise. Let me put that another way. When I read the headlines to the newspapers and the magazines, when I watch the programs on television, when I listen to the talk shows on the radio, and when I get on the internet and read the blogs and the posts, and all of that dialogue, I just see and hear a lot of noise. Because in the conversation that takes place, there's criticism, there's sarcasm, there's labeling, there's discounting, there's positioning. Basically, there's a whole lot of judgment. And the end result of all this is problems and circumstance don't get resolved, they just merely get pushed forward. And what's left in the wake of all this judgment at the individual level is the troubled soul. What's left in the wake of all this judgment at the relationship is the quarreling couple. What's left in the wake of all this judgment at the family unit is the dysfunctional family. What's left in the wake of all this judgment at the national level is the proverbial nation going to hell in a handbasket. And what's left in the wake of all this judgment at the national, the global level, is a world that just seems to be forever on the brink of disaster. You know, Sir Isaac Newton tells us in his Laws of Momentum that if things don't change, things won't change. Or more specific to this point, if the message doesn't change. If the message coming out of the social media in this country and abroad doesn't change, and if the message coming out of the seats of government in this country and abroad doesn't change, and finally, if the message coming out of the pulpits of the houses of worship in this country and abroad doesn't change, if those messages don't change, nothing's going to change. The next 2,000 years could look a whole lot like the last 2,000 years. Well, I have a new message, and it's truly a message of peace for each and every one. And it goes like this. When you were born, you were perfect. You were given a name, and you were a perfect human being. And what that means is from that moment to this, there's not one thing that you had to do to prove yourself as a human being. You didn't have to earn one more dollar or lose one more pound. You didn't have to win one more ball game or pass one more exam. You didn't have to buy a bigger house or have another child. In fact, you didn't have to get educated. You didn't have to get baptized. You didn't have to have a bar mitzvah or go on a jihad. You didn't have to get married. You didn't have to get pregnant. You didn't have to get promoted or elected or drafted. You didn't even have to get a job to prove yourself as a human being because you're already perfect. And just in case you've forgotten what that looked like, when you were born, you were unconditional love. You were a witness to life, and you were unconditional love, pure and simple. But for some reason, and it's generally unintentional, by the time we become teenagers or young adults or middle age, we're no longer unconditional with our love. Rather, we become quite conditional, and not only with our love, but with practically every aspect of our being. We lose sight of who we truly are as human beings. We only think we know who we are as human beings. For example, a lot of us define ourselves by our gender, by our race, or our sexual orientation. A lot of us define ourselves by our current social relationship, whatever that may be. We're single or we're going steady. We're boyfriend and girlfriend. We're bride and groom. We're husband and wife. We're mom and dad. We're grandma and grandpa. We're divorced or we're widowed. A lot of us define ourselves by our job title, by our job description, by our rank or seniority. We're a badge or a uniform that we wear. A lot of us define ourselves by our physical possessions. We're the vehicles we drive or the gadgets we own. We're the house or neighborhood we live in. A lot of us define ourselves by our physical appearance. We're bulging biceps or we're six-pack abs. We're the size of our breast or the length of our penis. We're a hairstyle. We're dreadlocks, we're piercings and tattoos. You know, a lot of us define ourselves by our beliefs and our opinions and our association and membership with different institutions that are social or political or religious. A lot of us define ourselves as fans or followers or devotees to other human beings and other causes. A lot of us define ourselves as victims. We're the victim of a natural disaster. We're the victim of a war. We're the victim of a divorce or a layoff. We're victims of some social injustice. Or we're victims of our own aging process. A lot of us define ourselves by our medical condition. We're a chronic ailment or a life-threatening disease. And finally, a lot of us spend a whole lot of time and money trying to define just who we are as human beings. But you know, the truth is, who you truly are as a human being cannot be defined by any of the things that I've just listed. In fact, who you truly are as a human being cannot be defined or limited or hampered or exaggerated in any way by the things I've just described. In fact, who you truly are as a human being, the eternal you, is a steward or the master of all these things that I've listed. And all those things do have meaning, but only at your discretion. And only at the secondary level, but not at the primary level of who you are as a human being. Now, for lack of a better word, let's refer to all these things as the things of this world. Now, do you suppose it's possible to rediscover who you truly are as a human being? You think it's possible to reconnect with that unconditional love that you were born with? Or if I can borrow a religious phrase, is it possible to be born again? Yeah, you sure can. And the good news is that it doesn't cost a dime. The good news is you don't have to know anybody. And the good news is you don't have to go anywhere. But the sad fact is that most of us will never ever get there. Our history and our current condition bears that out. But if you are interested in taking that personal journey, if you're interested in reconnecting with that unconditional love that you were born with, it requires but one word, and one word only. And that one word is awareness. Now, I know what some of you may be thinking, awareness. Kirk, that sounds mighty simple. Actually, having awareness of self is difficult. It's not intuitive for our species to have awareness of ourselves. What is intuitive for our species, however, is to have awareness of our environment, of the external. And we are masters at that. Why, did you know that in less than a split second, we can determine when another human being is acting inappropriate, acting out of line, or acting out of ego? But the problem is we just don't recognize it when we behave that way. Now, speaking of awareness, there's another idea I'd like to bring in for your consideration. And that is, a lot of people pay lip service to the notion that Jesus was the most perfect person who ever lived. What would that look like? What would it be like to be the most perfect person who ever lived? And I'm not talking about the post-resurrection Jesus. I'm talking about Jesus in his humanity. Or as I like to refer to it, Jesus before the media got a hold of him. What would it be like to be the most perfect person? Do you think he was the most handsome guy in Galilee? Maybe the Brad Pitt or George Clooney of Jerusalem? Probably not. Maybe Jesus was just the nicest person. Maybe he was a real people pleaser. I'll vouch that that wasn't it. Maybe Jesus was simply the most religious person. Well, maybe. So let's look a little deeper. The single greatest aspect about the character of Jesus in his humanity was that he truly understood who he was as a human being. He truly saw himself as unconditional love, and he was able to see other people the same way. Because you know, from what I've read about him, Jesus didn't judge people by what kind of clothes they wore, or where they were from, how much money they had, or even what they had done. And Jesus wasn't a hypocrite either, because he didn't judge himself that way. In other words, Jesus didn't judge himself by the things of this world. And he didn't judge other people by the things of this world. And you know what's amazing? When you start thinking like Jesus, you have the first of two revelations. And that is, you can begin to understand how he could have instructed us so simply 2,000 years ago that we should love ourselves and love other people the same way. Because you know, as long as you're judging yourself by the things of this world, you're not going to truly love yourself. And as long as you're judging other people by the things of this world, you're not going to truly love them either. So, do you suppose there's some steps, maybe some baby steps we can take to start this personal journey? To rediscover who we truly are as human beings? To reconnect with that unconditional love that we were born with? Yeah, there's some steps we can take. This is an interesting setting for this, but we'll give it a try. Now, before we start, know this. You are an eternal being, and you're already on an eternal journey. But we experience that eternity in the present moment. Not in the moment 6 months ago, and not in the moment 6 weeks from now, but the present moment. So let's see if we can bring some awareness to how we are in the present moment. Now, I know this is going to sound a little crazy, but I want you to imagine, just pretend for a minute, there's a miniature 6-inch version of yourself. And right now he or she is hanging up in the rafters and looking down at only you. It's kind of like your own guardian angel. In the present moment, what does he or she see about you? For example, in the present moment, are you sitting up straight or standing up straight? Now don't judge, but just be aware. In the present moment, are you paying attention to what's going on, or your thoughts and mind elsewhere? Don't judge, but just be aware. In the present moment, are you learning anything, or are you bored? Again, don't judge, but just be aware. Looking forward, how is it that you wake up each day? Do you wake up feeling happy, or do you wake up feeling grumpy? Don't judge, but just be aware. What do you suppose is the net impact you have on the very first person you encounter each and every day? Is it a net positive impact or net negative impact? Again, don't judge, but just be aware. When you meet somebody for the very first time, do you find that you like to talk about yourself? Or do you like to ask them questions about themselves? You don't judge, but just be aware. And finally, does your demeanor change over the course of a week? Are you happier on a Saturday than you are on a Tuesday? Again, don't judge, but just be aware. You see, when we bring this kind of awareness to how we are in the moment, a mighty important truth jumps out at us. And that is, the only thing that you can truly control in the moment is yourself. And what does that look like? Well, your control of self in the moment manifests itself in two ways. And that is, you can control A, what you do with intention, And you can control B, how you respond to the events that happen in your lives. So what is it we can do with intention in the moment? Well, a lot of things we can do with intention in the moment. For example, in the moment, with intention, you can control whether or not you're sitting up straight or standing up straight. In the moment, with intention, you can control whether or not you're paying attention to what's going on, or if your mind and thoughts are elsewhere. In the moment, with intention, you can control whether or not you're learning anything, or if you're bored. In the moment, with intention, you can control how you wake up each day. You can control the net impact you have on the first person you meet each day. You can control your demeanor over the course of the week. You can control the conversation you have with somebody that you first meet. And that may just be the tip of the iceberg. Because, you know, with intention, there's a lot of things you can control. For example, you can control the industry or profession that you decide to get involved in. With intention, you can control your wellness, how much you exercise. You can control how smart you become. You can control your schedule, your routine, your habits and your hobbies. You can control your consumption. You can control your output. You can control your focus and your speed. You can control which relationships you choose to get involved in. And finally, you can control whether or not you keep your word. Now, while we're on the subject, do you know what you can't control in the moment? That's another human being's intentions. We'll come back to that shortly. So we're talking about what it is that we can control in the moment, and I've suggested we can control A, what we do with intentions. I said we can also control B, how we respond to the events that happen in our lives. Now, what does all that look like? Well, everything that happens in life is either A, the result of your intention, B, the intention of another human being, which may or may not be directed towards you personally, and then C, things that just happen because we just happen to be alive. Now, do you think there's any guidebooks or instruction manuals or road maps how we're supposed to handle all this stuff? Yeah, there's plenty of them out there. Here's one, for example. There's one I like. It's called the Lord's Prayer. It says, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth." You know what that tells me? If you believe in God, then everything that happens in this world is the will of God. And that tells me that I shouldn't criticize or question or complain about anything that happens because it's all the will of God. Do you know what's interesting? Even if you don't believe in God, the end result at this point is the same. And that is, for whatever reason things happen, you can still control how you respond to them. Now, regarding all these events that happen, everything that happens in life is neutral. Everything that happens in life is neutral. The same rainstorm that floods one man's basement waters another man's corn. Everything in life is neutral. You know, events don't show up on our doorstep with a sign that says, "I'm a good thing," or "Watch out, here comes a bad thing." Everything that happens in life is neutral, and it stays neutral until and unless you judge it. Everything is neutral until you judge it. William Shakespeare said life is neither good nor bad, only our thinking makes it so. Everything is neutral unless you judge it. And maybe, just maybe, Jesus was trying to tell us to at least be aware of how often we judge things when he told us to consider the lilies in the field. They neither toil nor spin. Everything is neutral until you judge it. A wise man once said that living is kind of like standing in a stream, and all the events come floating towards us. How do you stand in your stream? With unconditional love? Or are you more conditional in your doing it? Again, don't judge, but just be aware. A final thought about this. You know, if you can respond to the, quote, bad things in life with the same grace and demeanor that you can respond to the, quote, good things in life. You know what you are in that moment? You know what you're being? You are a Holy Spirit. And that is a beautiful thing to behold. Now, I've been suggesting for the last few minutes the only thing we can truly control is ourselves. We can influence other people by being ourselves. But to try to control another human being is a function of ego. Now, what is ego? Ego is a very complex aspect of who we are as human beings. Ego is problematic because ego is never, ever satisfied. Think of ego as being a scale. It's a power scale, and on one end is all power, all control ego, and on this other end is no power, no control ego. And right in the middle there's this median where there is no ego. That's where we want to try to get to. Now, for lack of a better word, the single greatest act that a human being can perform in power, control, ego is to take another person's life. For lack of a better word, the single greatest act that a human being can perform in no power, no control, ego is to take their own life. But there are a lot of different levels and types of ego that are short of murder or suicide. For example, you can torture another human being or another creature, and that comes out of power, control, ego. Or you can torture yourself, and that comes from no power, no control, ego. You can abuse another human being or another creature, and that comes from power, control, ego. Or you can abuse yourself, that comes out of no power, no control, ego. You can annoy or harass another human being, and that comes out of power, control, ego. People that act like bullies in school, that's just power, control, ego. Or you can allow yourself to be annoyed and harassed, and that comes out of no power, no control, ego. Do you know that you can lie or be deceptive to another human being, and that comes out of power, control, ego? Or you can lie to yourself, that comes from no power, no control, ego. Now, as you might imagine, you can attempt to control people and situations and circumstances and outcomes, but that's power, control, ego. Male chauvinism is an example of power, control, ego. Or you can allow yourself to be controlled by people and situations and outcomes, and that's a function of no power, no control, ego. Do you know that you can try to make another human being feel sorry for you? That comes out of power, control, ego. The martyr syndrome is an example of power, control, ego. Or you can feel sorry for yourself, and that comes out of no power, no control, ego. Did you know that you can judge another human being, and that comes out of power, control, ego? That's right, you can simply pass judgment on another person, and that comes from power, control, ego. Or you can judge yourself, and that comes out of no power, no control, ego. Finally, you can deliberately be indifferent to another human being. That comes out of power, control, ego. You can pretend that you don't see them at all, and that's just power, control, ego. Or you can, quote, be indifferent to yourself, which translates, fail to see who you truly are as a human being, and that comes out of no power, no control, ego. Now, ego is overwhelming because ego can erupt in a single moment. Unfortunately, we can't get rid of ego. I don't think you can even have it surgically removed unless you have a lobotomy. But you don't want to do that. That's why there's this median in the middle where there is no ego. Like I said earlier, that's where we want to try to get to. Now, this median, let me give you an analogy about the median. This median, it's a lot like a path. It's a straight path, but it's very narrow, if you catch my drift. Okay? Now, the fact is, until you have some sense of awareness of self, and particularly until you have a sense of awareness of what it is that you can control in the moment, you're not going to have an awareness of when you're acting out of ego. And this is what that looks like. These are the symptoms or conditions associated with a life of ego. There's anger, frustration, arrogance, depression, anxiety, cheating, criticism, jealousy, blame, worry, arguing, defensive, restlessness, judgment, unaccountable, indifference, embarrassment, failure, guilt, vicariousness, disappointment, excuses, reactions, selfishness, lying, rationalizing, unreliable, dishonesty, and a whole lot of drama. Now, let's look at this for a second. If you are experiencing any or all these symptoms of ego, there's another name for that experience. That's right, if you're suffering from any or all these symptoms or conditions of ego, there's another name for that suffering. And you know what that is? This is the hell that we've heard about for 2,000 years. I bet you didn't see that coming. Let's dig a little deeper. So if these symptoms or conditions of ego, if that's hell, you know what that makes all those individual acts of ego that we talked about? Those are the sins that we've heard about for 2,000 years. Let's dig a little deeper. Okay, so if these symptoms or conditions of ego, if that's hell, and if all those individual acts of ego, if those are sins, you know what that makes your ego? Your ego is the devil that we've heard about for 2,000 years. So how about that? We've been on a personal journey for 22 minutes, and we're already in hell. We're sinners and we're the devil. I say the only way to go from here is up. You know what's tremendous about the life experience? In a single moment, you can have awareness of who you truly are as a human being. That's right, in a single moment, in the blink of an eye, you can have awareness of who you are, and you can have an awareness of what it is that you can truly control in the moment. Yes, in a single moment, you can have awareness of who you truly are, what it is that you can truly control, and you can recognize when you're acting out of ego and know how to handle that accordingly. In other words, in a single moment, in the same amount of time as it took the Big Bang to occur, to create all things, you can have awareness of who you truly are as a human being, and you can start living your life with intention. And this is where you gather together all the things that you truly love, all of your joys, all of your passions, all of your gifts, all of the things of this world. You gather all those things together and you create the life experience that you've always dreamed of. Except when you do it with awareness and intention rather than through ego, you're doing it for the right reasons. And you're doing it in balance, and you do it in the proper context. In other words, in a single moment, you can start living your life with awareness, and you can create your very own Garden of Eden. And you know what that experience is? When you're living with that kind of awareness of how you are down to the moment, and when you live with the peace of mind that comes with understanding what you can truly control in the moment, and when you live with the joy that comes from a life that's not full of ego, and you're living in that Garden of Eden that you've created for yourself, there's another name for that, and that's called heaven. So how about that? We're already on an eternal journey, and we're already in heaven. How can it get any better than that? You know, I mentioned earlier, when you start thinking like Jesus, you have two revelations. The first one, you learn how to love yourself and love other people the same way. The second revelation has to do with the concept of forgiveness. You see, When you understand who you truly are as a human being, when you can see yourself as unconditional love, it's as if the light has come on. And you're in the light, and you become a light. And we honor that gift of awareness by practicing forgiveness. Because the fact is, most people that you meet in this lifetime do not have an awareness of who they truly are as human beings. Most people that you'll meet in this lifetime are not aware when they're acting out of ego. In other words, most people that you meet in this lifetime are still, quote, in the dark. So we honor that gift of awareness by practicing forgiveness towards them when they sin against us. Because as Jesus told us so eloquently 2,000 years ago, we forgive them, for they know not what they do. Well, it's time for full disclosure. Yeah, it's time for full disclosure. In 1997, I was 41 years old, and I didn't love myself. In fact, I hated myself so much that I had a suicide attempt. Now, fortunately, I didn't use any ropes or sharp objects or ballistics. And when I look back at it, what makes it all the more surprising is the fact that I had a wonderful childhood. I've got some great parents. My mom had been married over 60 years. Dad had a good job. Mother got to stay home with us. We had a nice home. Lived in a great neighborhood. My brother and sister and I, we all got to go to private school. And I wasn't a troublemaker. I didn't skip school. I didn't do drugs. Like I didn't have a date till I got to college. In fact, it was in August of 1974, and I had just loaded up the two-door Buick Skylark and was getting ready to make a 5-hour drive from Nashville, where we lived, down to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where I'd been accepted as a freshman at the University of Alabama. But I remember thinking, as I headed down the driveway and out towards the interstate, well, here I go to figure out who I am as a person. Well, the first thing I know, I'm sitting in a dorm. I'm a freshman in college. I'm a pre-law major. I'm independent, which is college speak for not being in a fraternity. I'm not dating anybody, and I'm a Bible salesman. That's how I worked my way through college, selling Bibles. Well, a year would pass, so I'm a sophomore. I'm still a pre-law major. I'm not living in the dorm because I'm in a fraternity, living in a fraternity house. I'm dating this gal from Huntsville, and I'm the #1 Bible salesman in the company. Another year would pass, I'm a junior. Well, I've switched my major from pre-law to English political science. I'm not living in the fraternity house, I'm living in an apartment off campus. I'm not dating that girl from Huntsville, I'm dating a girl from Texas. And I didn't do too well selling my Bibles that summer. Well, finally, I'm a senior, so I'm an English political science major. I'm living in an apartment off campus. I'm not dating that girl from Texas anymore. I'm just anxious to get out and get a real job. Well, back then I never thought about getting an office job. I wanted to do something adventurous, so I got a job working on an oil rig in South Louisiana. I'd work a week on, then I'd have a week off. Work a week on, have a week off. The week I worked, I made $10 an hour for 40 hours straight time, and then $15 an hour for 44 hours overtime. I was renting a little room in Lake Arthur, Louisiana for $50 a week. And I was going out with just about anybody that would go out with me. I really enjoyed those times. But then I got injured. I got hit with some equipment on the job, and it broke my jaw in 6 places. So now I'm not working on an oil rig, I'm on workers' compensation. And I'm not renting that little room in Lake Arthur, I'm back home in Nashville recuperating with Mom and Dad. I'm getting 7 root canals. And I'll tell you, it's hard to be social when your jaws are wired shut. But the point I'm trying to make, basically for the next 25 years of my life, I judged myself by what kind of job I had, who I was dating, where I was living, and how much money I had, which I never had any. In other words, till I was 41, I judged myself by the things of this world. So when I was 41 years old, I said I'd been married and divorced. I'd started a company and closed a company. I filed bankruptcy. I'd been in jail a few times. I started drinking. I used some drugs. I've been a willing participant in an unplanned pregnancy. I said I've been to counseling. I joined the church. I owed over $100,000. I was a complete mess. Yet I'd had a great childhood. Had gone to private school. Had graduated from college and even joined the church. Fortunately, it was the gift of a friend that would help turn my life around and begin this journey I've been on ever since. But to wrap this up, just to quantify for you what it was like for me to be, quote, in the dark versus having some sense of awareness. By the time I was 41 years old, I had had about 17 different jobs in 5 or 6 different industries. I can't remember. I just couldn't find the perfect job. By the time I was 41 years old, well, since then I've had one job. I've had the same job. I'm a software consultant. Like I mentioned, I'm working out in San Francisco. By the time I was 41 years old, I think I had dated about 50 different women and had been married and divorced twice. I just couldn't find the right woman. Well, since then I've been with the same person, my beautiful Tina. We've been together for over 15 years. We've been married going on 9 years. When I was 41 years old, I didn't have a single asset to my name except for a chainsaw, a banjo, and a black iron cooking pot. Today, let's just say my fortunes have improved. I guess the biggest difference, when I was 41 years old, I didn't care whether I lived or died. That's how disappointed I was. But today, at this moment, I feel like I'm the happiest guy on the planet. I really am a lucky man. You see, when you understand who you truly are as a human being, you start to have glimpses of the eternal you. Now, the eternal you doesn't change. It can't change. It's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Yet there's a sensation that we have as we go from day to day and week to week and year to year. There's a sensation that something about us is changing. What that is just an accumulation of memories derived from our 5 senses. So when you close your eyes and you think back on one of your precious memories, maybe when you close your eyes, you see a big Thanksgiving meal prepared in a wonderful dining room and you're surrounded by family and friends. Or maybe when you close your eyes and you think back on a precious memory, maybe you're sitting on the beach with someone you love holding hands. Or maybe when you close your eyes, maybe the precious memory that you see, maybe you're a kid again and you're back home with mom and dad. Whatever it is, when you close your eyes and you see that precious memory, the you that's doing the seeing is the eternal you. And it hadn't changed at all. The only thing that's changed since that precious memory are the things of this world. In closing, you know, it was approximately 2 million years ago that our Homo erectus ancestors pulled themselves up out of the eastern shores of the African continent and commenced a migration around the world. I think it's fascinating that we've marked the advance of our human race with different ages. You know, first there was a Stone Age. Wow. A lot later there'd be an Industrial Age. Now we're in the Information Age and it seems like the entire world is participating. Well, it's my hope that once we've extracted every piece of data that we can from everything that's external to us, and we figured out how to store that information efficiently and use it for our collective benefit, it's my hope that we'll turn our attention inward and really start to understand who we truly are as human beings. It's my hope that there'll be an age of awareness, because I think if that time ever comes, that's when we'll see a genuine change in how we look at ourselves. And we'll see a genuine change in how we look at other people. And I think the result of that kind of change is that we will finally find the peace of mind that we've all been seeking so desperately for 2,000 years. Well, until that moment, I wish for each and every one of you many precious memories and much awareness. Thank you.